Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to this episode of Grasp the Cloud with Mongo and Konger. I'm Mongo, otherwise known as Matt Hester. I've been with Microsoft for many, many years, more than I'd like to probably care to admit. But we're doing this series and podcast to talk all things cloud. That's what we're talking about, Grasp the Cloud. We're going to focus on certification. We're going to focus on technology and a little bit of everything in between. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce, we also have Sarah with us. So Sarah, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to begin this journey with Matt. I'm Konger, but you can also call me Sarah, my real name, but my nickname is Konger. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. So every episode, we're going to try and bring you something a little bit different, but as Matt was saying, focusing on Azure and particularly learning and everything like that. So today, I'm pretty excited. We have a senior content developer from Microsoft. His name is Brandon Neeb, and he has been with Microsoft for how long, Brandon?
Yes, 20 years in April.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like the baby. My 1 year anniversary is coming up next week. So we got Matt and Brandon both here, been for 20 years, and there's Sarah that's been here for a year. But
Yeah, he's
anyway,
going for that
so
big crystal too.
I am. I'm excited about it.
what do you get? A crystal?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you get a big red crystal thing and then they throw you a party too, is my understanding. So
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I'm
virtual
excited.
party
Yeah.
though,
mine
right?
mine happened in the midst of COVID. So I got say, hey, Matt, go throw a party alone, go cater something. Okay, so I have my own party.
Mm.
Well, that's nice. Anyway, so
Anyways,
Brandon, I wanted to talk to you about the new SC exams that are up and coming. So I guess the first question I have is why the SC exams?
Yeah, so Microsoft has been in the security space for quite some time, but in the last year, we've gotten very serious about security, compliance, and identity. And so there has been internally, there's a new customer solution area with the same name, right? And so we've pulled in, everything that has to do with identity, the compliance products, and then our security, threat protection, all that kind of stuff is all together now within one organization. And yeah, so we decided to get really serious about exams in that space. And yeah, as you probably know, the two security exams we had out before, the AZ500 and then the MS500, which was the M365 kind of version of the Azure security exam, were the two that we had in market, and those have been out for at least a couple years now. And so yeah, we've the first thing we did when we came up with this new solution area and kind of in this new security focused cert group was to bring those two exams into the group. So we started with not nothing. We started with those two exams and all the curriculum that supports that. And so now we are building a whole bunch of new certs in that space. And yeah, that's what we have going on. They just released a month ago.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that they're numbered like 200, 300, 400, and 900. I'm assuming that has to do to align with the current AZ certifications, like the dev certification, the architect, and so on.
Yeah. So the numbering's kind of funny. Yeah, the 900 aligns with the other fundamentals, right? So there's a modern
Right.
work or M365 fundamentals and Azure fundamentals. They are all in that 900 series. So that's kind of why we came up with the security fundamentals was going to also be 900. The other numbers, 2, 3, and 400, are the associate level, right? So in the cert space at Microsoft, we've basically got three levels of certs. There's that foundational or fundamentals level. There's the middle level, which is the associate, which is where most of our certs live in that middle level, and then there's that expert level where we put like a lot of our architect type certs. And yeah, so the numbering is kind of aligned with that, and it's kind of funny. Yeah, the story is so last August when we decided to build these, and I was leading the charge as far as getting the focus groups, the job task analysis work that we do to figure out what's in these roles, what tasks are actually in there, and we had to come up with a number for all this stuff, and you know, typical kind of thing where you got a lot of people, that but nobody really wants to give the answer to what it should be or whatever. So I just put those numbers down in August, And I thought, well, we'll see how long this lasts until somebody objects to it, right? And then and here we are 7 months later, and those numbers and even the SC part of it was also just something I came up with back then. So.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of funny. Everybody thinks there's like magic mojo when we name our projects. Like, no, we happen to be in Whistler, Canada. That's why the code name was called Whistler. So there
Right.
you have it. The name of these new exams were just Brandon
Yeah.
thought, hey, that sounds good.
Hey.
Why not? And it just, like spaghetti against a wall, it stuck.
So that's how we got the numbers. The names we actually put a lot of effort into. So that's the numbers it just was pulled out of a hat, but the names like security operations analyst, we spend quite a bit of time on that, on the actual naming though. Yeah.
And and these exams are just, they're going to also have a course that's going to go with them.
Yep.
Like a
Yep.
3 or 4 day course, do you think?
Right. So we support our certs with both content that's on Microsoft Learn and then also instructor-led training as well. And so at the same time the certs came online at the beginning of February, we also published Microsoft learning plans that map directly to these certs to help people do prep. And in fact, if you go to MS Learn and you just look up the numbers like SC200 or SC300, we actually put those numbers in the titles of the learning plans. So there's little confusion. You can directly find what content maps directly to those exams.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, if, because I know the exams are in beta, but the courses aren't available yet. So my comments kind of lead into that and say, so how does a
Mm.
person study for that right now? So what do
Yeah.
they, and so that's the Microsoft Learn. That's
Yep.
great.
Yeah, Microsoft Learn would be the place to study for it right now. You can do self-study there, right? There's a lot of interactive guides that you can do that are embedded within those to allow for self-paced learning. And like the SC200 content specifically, there's a number of custo scripts, so you can do a lot of that kind of, threat mitigation, those kind of inquiries, that kind of stuff on your own if you've got your own tenant or your own Azure subscription. The instructor-led training though that's coming online in about a month. Sometime in April is when we should start seeing those. Our learning partners will start offering those classes. Those take a little longer to develop because we've got labs in there, so with tenants and subscriptions and all that stuff, plus all the slide decks. There's a whole bill of materials that kind of comes with an instructor-led training that just takes a little bit longer to get out the door. But yeah,
And
that's the plan.
do you find that, are you going to see that you're going to continue to use the AZ500? That certification is still going to maintain?
Yeah, so that's been the biggest question since this has rolled out in the last month or so, is what is the story with AZ500 and also MS500 is the
Right.
other one. Yeah, because people see, well, there's a lot of overlap in the objectives, and that is true. So the way they're going to be around still is the short answer. And in fact, in mid-May, sometime we are updating. We're doing a fresh look at those exams in terms of the objectives, and we do a focus group every year or less to evaluate whether or not those certs and content still align with what's in the market and that kind of thing. So we're doing that in May. So those two aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay.
The way I would think about the overlap story is, and I'll talk more about MS500 because that's been my background the last few years, is that when we first contrived that cert 3 years ago, it was, we knew we needed a Microsoft 365 kind of centric, security cert. And so we ended up kind of putting everything in there, right? So there's identity, there is compliance, it goes into threat protection. It's very broad. So it's kind of like the generalist M365 cert. Even touches on Azure or Azure Sentinel a little bit as well. So that's a really broad-based cert. If you are the type of person that covers all those things, then that's the cert for you, right? Because it covers all that. Some of the feedback though on that is out in the real world. People are usually focused on either threat protection or identity or compliance is has been kind of the feedback. And so for those people that are so focused, that exam's kind of hard, right? Because
Right.
if you're a compliance person, you don't have anything to do with threat mitigation, then you've got a lot to learn and a lot to cover there. So these new certs kind of solve that problem, right? Because 200 is totally focused on security operations, 300 is entirely focused on identity, and then the 400 is completely focused on information protection, which in the context of MS500 was only 15 to 20% of that exam. So now we've got an entire exam that's focused on what was just 15 to 20% of that generalist cert. Yeah.
That's great. No, I think that was an excellent idea on Microsoft's part to do that because I know myself as an Azure technical trainer and teaching, the AZ500 and the ARC classes, you always get people that, you get one people that are asking more thing about Azure AD and then another one asking about application security infrastructure. And it's nice to see it broken down now into 4 different areas so that way they can focus, like you said. Yeah, I love
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Matt?
and when you really look at those certs, I think it's starting to show the story of how serious we as a company. You, Brandon, and I, we've been here a while, and Sarah, you've been in the industry a while. And whenever you say Microsoft and security, people have a tendency to chuckle. And now I like to use a phrase, and it's from some coworkers I learned this from. Microsoft's the largest security company you've never heard of. So I like the fact that we're breaking them down because then we can showcase a lot of the technologies we've been working on, not even to mention the industry stuff we're doing to fight all the impersonators and the botnets that are in the world, showing what we can do to even protect some of those basics. So I really like it. It's going to be a lot of work for Sarah and I, but it's cybersecurity is kind of one of our passions as well. So I think you're doing a great job here because people don't know our end-to-end story in security. And when you tell people, hey, look at Microsoft, we use only our stuff. There are no third-party products really in our infrastructure that secure anything. So I like the fact that we're isolating these into other ones.
I agree. I have one really important question, and that's the last question. So, in a couple weeks, I'm doing SC300. I already have it booked. So, what's on the exam, Brandon?
What's on the exam? Yeah, I would if we don't share those kind of secrets, but the what is on the exam is very similar to the identity portions, like the functional group for AZ500. There's the entire 25%, that first chunk of AZ500 is all
Okay.
on identity. So it's very similar. If you did, and that's the question I get quite a bit lately is, so if I did really well on AZ500 or MS500, am I gonna, what should I take? What's going to be easiest for me? And it's like, well, it depends on what section of those two certs you did really well on, right? Because when
Right.
you take a cert, right, you get the
The
report
breakdown.
that shows you, okay, you did this well on this section, that. So if you did really well on the identity section of either AZ500 or MS500, you'll probably do really well on the SC300 exam, I would say.
And I did the MS 100 2 weeks ago, and I passed that. So that had MS 100 that will have a little bit in it too, I would assume, right?
Yeah, yeah. MS100 and MS500 kind of overlap quite a bit because there's a lot of
Okay.
security and stuff, and yeah, in both of those. And so yeah, yeah. So yeah, if you did well on that, you're in that space.
Okay, good. Because next week is MS 101, and then after that, SC 300. So it's
Yeah.
always taking exams, Matt. That's Matt and our lives, isn't it, Matt?
Mm.
Constantly taking exams.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that's really nice now is our exams are hard but fair. I think you look
Mm.
at our exams now,
Yes.
they're not making up. We've been taking exams, Sarah and I don't know, Brandon, if you've ever sat for the old exams where they had double negatives in the questions. There's none of
Mm.
that. You either know
Right.
they're almost guest proof. And one of the guests we're going to have on Graspable Cloud is Liberty Munson, and her job is to make our exams guest proof. So we're going to
Yeah.
talk about that of what they have. And so when you look at the exams, I got to ask this question because I want the evil laugh out of you. Is did you, if when you looked at the questions, and don't say what the question is, did you just go, oh, that's a really hard one. No one's ever going to get that right. Or you just kind of giggled like that's really tough.
Oh yeah, that happens. Yeah, 'cause that is part of my job is is to review them, right? And I'm not an expert on everything at all, that are in these. And yeah, there are times when, and it's usually the ones with the really long stem, right? Where it's like you scroll through and it's like 3-page
Oh,
scenario
God.
kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, I lost interest about halfway through reading this. I don't know who's going to be able to answer this one, but um yeah. Yeah.
Those are the
So
ones that I go right to the answers and right to the last paragraph of the question. You're
right.
right.
Let's see if I can figure this out.
Fill my
Yeah,
head
C,
with crap I
C
don't need.
sounds really good. Now, one of the things, Brandon, I'm curious to know is, do you have people come in and do you read the comments when students say this is a really bad question, or do you know what that process looks like? You know, because
Yeah.
I've commented on questions, I'm thinking, does it just go to a bucket in the sky that no one looks at?
No, those all get looked at, and when you have Liberty on, she'll talk more about that. But um, there's an entire team of people that just focus on the exam itself. So what I do in my role mostly is develop the objectives and what the tasks are for a particular role. And then once those tasks have been identified, they get handed off to a team of people who their entire job is writing questions. And to your point earlier, that's why the exams have gotten so much better. Is the people who write the items are so well trained in kind of how to write an exam question that is fair, like
Right.
you say. But yeah, they all that feedback goes into a tool set that we see. I don't see those myself, so the reviews I do are very similar to anybody else that would do a review of it. I see the question and then I may, make a comment or whatever. Usually what I'm looking for is to make sure that products, reference properly. Sometimes people put shortcut, abbreviations for things and that kind of stuff. So, I look for that. I try to make, and then make sure that the item is actually aligned with the objectives. And so on the associate level exams, right, there's kind of more leeway in that, in the sense that um, the associate level items can be a little more complex or a little less complex. The fundamentals exam is a little different, right? Those ones we try to stick to knowledge based questions, right? So you should never in a fundamentals type exam see a 2-page story scenario and then have to answer a lot of questions around it. So those ones I get much more concerned when I'm evaluating like a fundamentals type exam whether or not the question's too hard.
Nice. Yeah, I know. I remember back in the 90s when I started taking the exams, it was all about, just memorization. And I remember the
Hmm.
title that we used to get was Paper MCSE. And I tell my
Right.
students now that there's no way you can just walk in with just reading the book and not actually working with the product, because they especially the ones where the true and false ones don't
Yeah.
like those questions. Those
Right.
ones are tricky, where you have to pick which service you would use, but then there's
Yep.
always like there could be a couple things you're looking for, but really we're always looking for the best practice, right?
Yeah.
So I always tell the students to focus on the best practices in the FAQs.
Yeah. Well, and now that with the performance-based testing that's in the exams is really
Right.
exciting, right? Where the learner gets the chance to actually go into a tenant and do a procedure, and that kind of takes away that whole concept of paper-based, MCS or whatever
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
started. It's like that's gone with that, because if you can't actually do these procedures, you're not going to pass that part of the test. So.
So will the SC exams have that performance based in all of them?
My understanding is they are supposed to. I haven't seen them yet, and in fact, we only just got the tenants we're using together like a couple of weeks
Okay.
ago for the ILT. So I'd be very surprised if they're in there. Any, I know they're not part of the beta, right? If you take the beta,
Okay.
it's just the questions. But yeah, um, yeah, no, those are, and people like those. People that passed, really like that part of it, because,
I
again, it
do.
illustrates
Yeah.
that they know how to do a procedure. It's a practical implementation of something. Um, Grading those is a little tricky, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
took the MS100 a couple weeks ago, and I was shocked to see that performance based in there. And there was 12 tasks to do. And
Mm,
the first 5, I just skipped them because I couldn't remember. And that's what I've been telling my students. When you get to the performance based, don't stress. Just keep reading each task until you pick one, and then answer it or go and do it in the lab. And then
hmm.
it was like my brain just kicked in. And then I was like,
Right,
oh, now I remember everything is, right? Because I'll get
right.
your nerves and everything. So yeah, I actually enjoyed it. And I think I missed one of the tasks, but I still passed my exam. But yeah, once
Yeah,
it was done, then you don't get your mark right away. You'd find
right.
out a couple hours later, like you said, because of the grading.
Yeah, yeah, that's all done with PowerShell in the back end. So
Nice.
anytime we ask you to do something, yeah, then and you say you're done with it, we run a PowerShell script, and it has, checks to make sure that you actually did whatever it was we asked you to do. And So it's objective. That's for sure.
So it doesn't check. I guess you don't get marks not because I remember when I took the 300 exam, it asked me to create an application gateway and I screwed it up. So I deleted it and recreated it. So we don't get dinged for that, right? When you delete
No,
something.
no.
Okay.
And in fact, yeah, on the MS500, one of them was, to create a DLP policy to, protect credit cards from your finance or whatever. I don't remember the details of it, but, you could create 5 DLP policies as long as you created the right one that we
Oh,
asked you to.
interesting.
Right. Yeah. Because the PowerShell script just says, hey, does a DLP policy that does this and that actually exist within the tenant that they just did? And so, yeah. It,
So
Wow.
I always have a question about those because you say call it this by this name of the service. Do we actually have? I always was like worry. What if I make a typo, which I make
yeah.
typos every day, or is it just looking for the functionality? Because I've always wondered that. Because I told my students like if it says call it 503B8912, call it 503B8912, and there, or does
Yeah.
it doesn't matter?
It can, depending on who wrote the script and what the script says to validate. Yeah. For example, when we first came out, if you remember when Teams first came out, PowerShell, there were very few PowerShell scripts that worked for Teams at first. And so the number of things that we could actually grade on a performance-based Teams exam was very limited. And so, yeah, there's only, but yeah, what it comes down to is, yeah, if the script says, does a DLP policy called X, is that that may be part of the script, I suppose, if it
If it's
asks you
looking
that
for
in
that, yeah.
question. Yeah.
Hopefully it's not case sensitive or anything. But anyway.
Yeah, if it tells you, but yeah, if it tells you to name it something specific, name it something specific
Yeah.
to be sure.
Yeah.
Let's
Don't
put it
do
that way.
typos and that and all that.
Yeah.
Well, that inquiring mind now knows. Matt, no more typos. Oh man.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Brandon. This has been great. It's learned a lot actually. I didn't about the performance base. Didn't even expect that. So that was a nice little treat. I don't know, Matt, if you've got any other things that you want to ask Brandon or
I just think about, Brandon, what is when you think about the exam, what's the number one thing you can tell the people listening to this going, hey,
Mm,
you need to focus your study here, or, what would be some advice you might give to people
yeah.
looking to take the exam in there? Since you won't tell us the questions, can you give us at least some advice?
The secret, I guess that, yeah, this the hint or secret, yeah, secret hint, not so secret, but the SC200, right, the Security Operations Analyst exam, the curriculum we built has a lot of KQL, right, a lot of Custo query
oh,
language. um, there is not that much KQL on the exam. So that was one of those things where we wanted to cover a lot of it in training because there wasn't a lot of KQL content out there, and we wanted there was a lot of demand for that. So we have if you'll notice, we have an entire learning plan just on doing KQL queries. But yeah, that's disproportionate to the amount of KQL that's on the exam. That's my one hint
that's
that you
your
get.
hint.
That's a
That's your
good hint. Well,
Yeah.
and for
Jeez.
well, and for those of you who don't know what KQL is or Custo, it's how we query our log analytics. So it has to do with how we find the stuff that might not supposed to be there inside of our environment. So it's a really good tool. Not only I'm glad. By the way, I'm hugely glad we have a course on that
I
because
agree.
that'll impact all the Azure monitoring stuff we do for log analytics. So folks, we'll make sure we'll have links to those courses in the comments of this so you can actually take a look at it. I would look like like in learning KQL, like learning PowerShell or learning CLI. It's just
Yeah.
something you kind of have to know to do if you're using Microsoft Cloud technologies.
And then my last and final question. I know I think I said that twice already. But Brandon, give me one of your favorite memories at Microsoft.
Sure. Yeah, I would go back to early on in my time. Anybody that's been around 20 years, right, it's probably been in the vicinity of Bill Gates or Steve Ballmer or something at one point. So my story would be, yeah, shortly after. So I started with Great Plains Software, and we were acquired in 2001. In 2002, Bill Gates came to our Great Plains customer conference in Orlando in March. So I was there as a presenter for one of the project accounting sessions that I was doing at that point, and my session was right before Bill was to give his keynote. And the green room that they had at the convention center down in Orlando for that conference, all the speakers were kind of together, right? So I'm like super nervous about to give this presentation in front of like a couple hundred people about my thing. And I go into the green room and there's Bill Gates because he's getting all
Right.
prepped to do his session, right? And so this is spring of 2002. So security is like super tight. He's got, guards around him. He's got the makeup thing, the thing they put around your collar to, because they're doing makeup, all that kind of stuff, and prepping them for the set. There's probably 20 people around him, but I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, okay, I've been with the company for like a year. I'm 25 years old, and here's Bill and his army of people around him, and I'm in the green room with Bill. And wow, okay, this is kind of
That would be
this
very
is one.
surreal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those kind of clarifying. Wow, I can't believe this is happening,
You
and
did
wasn't
it.
expecting it to happen. Yeah, I'm like, okay, yeah. And then the next 20 years, I never saw him again. And that was like the height of my
It just went
exposure to
downhill from
Bill. It
there,
was it was yeah. So for the last almost 19 years, it's been not as good, but yeah.
So do you have that awkward selfie where it's not really a selfie and you just kind of have your picture in the front and he's like standing behind, not looking at the camera? Do you have that awkward selfie, Brandon?
No, that was way too long ago. This is 2002. They barely had digital cameras back then. This is
Yeah, that's
uh,
true. I think it was a
yeah.
BlackBerry back then. Yeah.
Yeah, that awkward, like, hey, look, I had a selfie with Bill Gates, and Bill's not even looking at the camera. Awesome. That's an
It is super
amazing story.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you, Brandon. We really appreciate you being here. You've been great. So nice to talk to you. It's been a blast. So thank you.
Good.
So yeah, so that's it for Mongo and Konger. So our little nicknames. I hope you enjoyed that. Matt, you got any final words to our listening viewers?
No, I think we were gonna kind of ask him a question, maybe. Hey, what are
Yeah,
you all planning to do? Are any of you looking to plan to take some of those SC exams? I know Sarah and I are definitely that's on our roadmap because I know our organization we're probably going to be doing some of that training here in the relatively near future, in addition to all the rich Azure stuff we do. So put in our comments, let us know that you're there. We'd like to know what kind of certifications you're looking to go after next. If you're looking to go to the SC one, just let us know. But thank you so much for listening, everybody. Brandon, thank you so much for your time, and Sarah, as always, a blast.
yes, so much fun. Thank you, everybody. Until next time.